In the years 2020 and 2021, astrologers expect massive violence, destruction and war. In the way that we've seen it before, it's not like unprecedented end of the world material, but it isn't looking good. 2019, we will increasingly see the build up to that. Astrologers have been eyeing 2020 for some time. And there's a cycle, 2020, which really will go to 21 and 22 as well. But primarily 2020 is when it all really starts happening. So the very important cycles of 2020, and we really mean January 2020, we will see the cycles of 2020 developing rapidly after November of 2019. So I wanted to get in a few words about that now. While 2012 and 2008 were about the breakdown that leads to the new, 2020 is about the contraction due to the reactionary forces of the old. So the cycle of 2020 has a period of around about 35-40 years. They vary from time to time because they are not perfect circles that we are measuring. So planets move in ellipses, not in circles. So the cycles are a little bit more complicated. But the bottom line is that we are entering into a phase of contraction that we have seen a couple of times more, very notably in 1982 and more recently in 2001. So watching this cycle, the cycle of the great big planets of Saturn and Pluto, it is the cycle of conservatism. The philosopher, historian, astrologer Richard Tarnas describes this kind of thing as a period of contraction. He says these can be shown in history as eras of international crisis and conflict, the empowerment of reactionary forces and totalitarian impulses, organized violence and oppression, lasting traumatic effects. He says others have described it as the end of innocence, the destruction of an earlier mode of life that in retrospect might have been marked by indulgence, decadence, even naivety, but denial. It often leads to the deployment of massive, highly disciplined, carefully organized, destructive power. Need I say more that this exact same cycle was there in 1914, the year, of course, of the beginning of the First World War, and 1939, the year of the beginning of the Second World War. So the four stages of the cycle, which are more frequent in 35 years, are often shown to be the trigger for wars. And astrologers do expect that 2020 will be characterized by war. It does look like it's a war that the United States is heavily involved in and might have more to do with the United States than Europe, which was the case of the previous world wars. And indeed, when we look at Donald Trump's charts, after November of 2019, he looks increasingly like he is just going to start a war. I mean, from my look at his chart, it looks like that's what he wants to do, and it's an aggressive stance that he is eventually going to lead to ways of looking for ways to start a war.